President Biden's massive student loan forgiveness plan is being debated by the Supreme Court. The justices heard 3 hours of arguments yesterday questioning whether the president has the power in the first place to cancel debt because of COVID.
Joining us this morning to break down these arguments is our 9 News legal analyst, Whitney Traylor. Whitney, good morning.
Good morning to you both.
Good morning.
And everybody.
And everybody else. What stood out to you most about yesterday's arguments?
Well, the arguments were interesting because there were arguments on procedural issues and then arguments more on the merits. So the procedural issues was whether the plaintiffs there were essentially 2 cases that were appealed up, whether the plaintiffs had standing, and standing relates to actually being injured. So one case was brought by 6 Republican states and one was by 2 students. And so the procedural issue was the standing issue. But on the merits, the question was, did President Biden have the authority to just initiate this through the Department of Education? And John Roberts made some really, I think he sort of encapsulated that argument best, because he said, look, Joe Biden, you passed this with essentially an executive action, so the people weren't involved, they weren't able to comment. Now you're saying that these plaintiffs don't have standing, so they can't get involved, and then you didn't get Congress involved. And so he said, look, this is too much authority, $400 billion over the next 3 decades, for just a president to be able to do with one sort of sweep.
And this is all, he's citing the HEROES Act, right, of 2003 or whatever, that President Trump actually enacted during the pandemic, which still exists today, right?
That's exactly right. So that was after 9/11, and that was passed to essentially help folks who were serving so that their student loans, they weren't in worse position afterwards. And so the HEROES Act, it actually says it allows the Secretary of Education to waive or modify terms of federal student loans in connection with a national emergency. And so President Trump actually started this by putting the interest payments, those are not accruing. So that's $5 billion a month. Nobody's really talking about that. But he initiated that. So here the question is, well, is canceling the debt waiver or modification? And so they're saying, no, canceling is too far. You know, this just said you could waive or modify certain things. So that's some of the more legal nuanced issues.
And he says that this is the Biden administration. They say they were able to do this because exactly what you said, that we are in fact still labeled under a national emergency at this time.
That's exactly right. And the pandemic, we're supposed to be until May 11th. And so what they're saying is that, look, the reason for this is the financial situation we're in after a national emergency. So here, when you're looking at the parameters for which this applies, you have people who are making $125,000 or less can get $10,000 of student debt waived, $20,000 if they had a Pell Grant. So these aren't significant numbers. And so they're saying that in light of what's happened after the pandemic, and we're still recovering, the people in that sort of category would benefit, and it would ultimately benefit the entire economy because people will keep it moving.
Well, there was a lot that came out of day 1 of the arguments, and I know there's going to be several more days of this, so I'm sure we'll be checking back in with you to get your thoughts.
Yes, and there'll be a decision in probably June or July, so.
Ways to go.
Yeah, hopefully I'll be back then.
You'll be back.
You'll be back, Whitney. Thank you.